Chapter 21. Gift Pet, Withering Ration. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day, Tonen woke up early and walked out of the Uchiha clan's territory. Instead of going to the academy, he went to a pet store in the shopping street and picked out a kitten. The kitten was white and had 4 pink little paws. It was very small and fluffy. After putting it into a small cage provided by the store, Tonen went on his way to the academy. As soon as he entered the classroom, he attracted a lot of attention, as usual. Among them were Hyuga Chirio and Uchiha Mina. And Kakashi, as well. Tonen walked straight to Mina and placed the cage on her table. I thought about it last night, and I think this little guy might be able to help you. Mina was a bit too surprised looking at the kitten in the cage and asked, Tonen-kun, is this for me? Yes. Thank you. When the students in the classroom saw this, they all chattered away into another discussion about the couple. In a silent corner that no one was paying attention to, Chirio was lost in thought, and her fists were clenched hard under the desk. Her fingernails had pierced through the palm skin, causing blood to trickle out. Even though Chirio beat and threatened Mina the last time, the latter was an Uchiha. She was unlikely to remain suppressed. For starters, Mina didn't think there was much of a gap between their abilities. And after having received Tonen's guidance, she believed it wouldn't be long before she surpassed Chirio. When Tonen took the initiative to gift her a pet, she accepted it without any concern. During the class, Yumano Naoto was lecturing from the podium. As usual, Tonen listened intently, even though he had already learned everything. But to maintain the persona he had in everyone's hearts, he could only pretend to be attentive in class. Chirio sat rigidly on her seat, staring intently at his back the whole time. Mina, on the other hand, was secretly playing with the kitten that Tonen gifted her. Seeing the cute kitten curled up in a ball inside the cage, Mina curiously put a finger inside. Then, she saw the kitten poking its head up, approaching her finger, and giving it a sniff before licking her fingertip with its pink tongue. Mina's heart melted in an instant. When she looked up at Tonen who was sitting at the front, her heart was delighted to the core. Don't worry, Tonen-kun. I'll take good care of this little guy. After the first period, Chirio came to Mina with an icy look on her face. Come outside, Chirio whispered. She took the lead and headed towards the field. Glancing at Tonen who was absorbed in his book, Mina fearlessly followed her out. Under the tree shade, Chirio and Mina faced each other. You really think I won't kill you? The veins around Chirio's eyes flared up, and a morbidly ruthless expression surfaced on her face. Why don't you stop with that weak act? Don't think I'm afraid of you just because you've awakened your Byakugan, Mina replied, crossing her arms and looking at Chirio as if she had won a big match. Chirio slowly raised her hands and assumed the gentle fist seal. Only the same kind of people can be together. Both Tonen-kun and I are orphans. I'm the most suitable one for him. Mina grabbed a kunai from her bag and pointed it at Chirio. Is this a joke? My parents were killed in action during the Second Great Shinobi War. Based on your logic, I'm an orphan too. Why should I give up on Tonen-kun? Chirio was stunned, and silent for a long time, seemingly lost in thought. They were at the ninja academy right now. The most she could do was teach Mina a lesson. If I killed her here, I'd be punished. Even worse, Tonen-kun would find out and I might never have a chance with him again. With that in mind, Chirio put away her Byakugan and knelt on the ground with both hands on the floor. I'm begging you. Please give Tonen-kun to me. You still have your clan but I have nothing. I can't live without him. Since she couldn't take it by force, she had to come at it in another way. Mina never expected Chirio to pull this trick. Just give up. Mina slightly eased her tone, and said, by the way, aren't you missing a little detail here? Chirio looked up at Mina, puzzled. The Hyugas don't allow intermarriage with other clans. I had never thought of you as a love rival, I just don't like you. After saying that, Mina's lips curved into a smile. She put away her kunai and headed back to class. Cheerios kneeling today put her in a very good mood. All the haze of her past defeat was swept away. Under the tree in the field, only Cheerio was left kneeling with her head deeply bowed, a manic expression on her face. When it was almost time for class, she returned like a walking corpse. In fact, most people in Konoha knew about the Hyuga clan's rule forbidding intermarriage. Just that there was nothing in it to gossip about, so no one usually talked about it. It never crossed Cheerio's mind either. When Mina pointed it out, she recalled that everyone she saw at the clan's ground was a Hyuga. She had never seen any Hyuga clan members move out of the clan through marriage or anyone marrying in. Cheerio only needed one simple confirmation to realize that Mina was stating a fact. During class, she couldn't take in a single word. Her face was pale as a sheet of paper and her eyes were threatening to spill tears that she was forcibly holding back. That means Tonen.kun and I can't be together. Even if Tonen.kun liked me, the clan won't agree to it. Cheerio reached in between her thick bangs and stroked the caged bird mark. Doviko, what about leaving everything behind and eloping? Is that even impossible? Caged bird, a cage that one could never be free from. The only way out is death. But there's no Tonen kun in the world of the dead. When she thought of this, Cheerio moved her gaze slightly and looked at Tonen's back. Tonen.kun, even in death, I want to be with you. On the tree outside the window, 2 white pigeons were nestled together. Tonen had watched everything that happened. Even though he did not know what they said, he could guess it. Tonen gave up on Cheerio. All day long, all she had on her mind was love and relationships, and he wasted so much time eating out with her. He wanted to give her enough hope and courage to compete with Mina, but she never thought about working hard. Looking at her appearance now, she even seemed despondent. This provision was ruined, so he could only pin his hopes on Mina now. Mina seemed to really like that kitten. Once she pours enough affection on it, Tonen planned to find the right opportunity to kill it before the Third Great Shinobi War. That way, maybe he could force Mina to awaken her Sharingan. Chapter 22. Cheerio's appointment, ruthlessly killing the cat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 22. Cheerio's appointment, ruthlessly killing the cat. The next few days, Hyuga Cheerio never came to look for Uchiha Tonen. Every day, she sat on her seat in a daze, quietly watching him with a morbid look. She was as quiet as a corpse, which made Tonen very uneasy. Cheerio, aren't you resting well these days? Cheerio lifelessly turned her head and looked at Asuma, who seemed very concerned. She paused for a moment, and with a pale smile, she gestured him to come closer with her finger. Asuma's eyes shone and moved his head a bit closer. Asuma, do you like me? Cheerio's voice was slightly hoarse, but in Asuma's ears, it was a heavenly sound. Hee. Asuma scratched his head, looking embarrassed. Happiness had come so suddenly that he was unable to speak clearly for a moment. Can you help me with something? Asuma patted his chest and said, no problem. With me, nothing is impossible. Cheerio's smile disappeared instantly, and it was replaced with an ice-cold look as she said in a low voice, find a chance and help me kill Mina's cat. Asuma nearly choked on his saliva. I'm only joking. Cheerio's expression suddenly changed, and a smile appeared on her face again. Asuma sighed in relief and said, looking embarrassed, you frightened me. Then, before he completed his words, Cheerio handed him a piece of paper and said, will you help me hand this to Tonen.kun? You cannot peek. No problem. Asuma took the note without thinking too much. After all, the entire class knew that Tonen and Mina were a couple. He walked over to him, put the note on his desk and said, Cheerio asked me to give this to you. Tonen took the paper, unfolded it, and saw the words written on it. Tonen.kun, I want to talk to you alone. Tomorrow night, at 9 o'clock, I'll wait for you under the waterfall on the east side of the Hokage rock. See you there. After reading it, Tonen turned his head to look at Chirio and nodded. A hint of a smile appeared on her pale face. Tonen didn't want to waste time playing some silly ROM.com with these two children. However, to be an accomplished hunter, one must remember to always put on a disguise before baring the fangs. The next day, October 6th, was also a weekly holiday. Hatake Sakumo was resting at home. Tonen would not waste such a big opportunity. Early in the morning, he went to the Hatake household for lessons with Sakumo together with Kakashi. He didn't return home until evening, and after dinner, he came to the Uchiha clan's northern training ground to train Mina. At this moment, outside the clan's grounds, Chirio came over with a bag of cat food. This is the Uchiha clan's territory, why did you come here? The two patrolling guards saw Chirio and stopped her. Chirio was like a startled kitten. She quickly lowered her head, then said weakly with a red face, I came to look for Mina, to feed. One of the patrol guards saw the cat food in her hands and impatiently said, feed the cat, isn't it? Chirio nodded weakly. The patrol guards obviously felt that such a young child wouldn't pose any danger and allowed her in. Go in. She nodded her head, and as if she suddenly thought of something, she looked at the patrol guards nervously and said, Uncle, it's my first time here. I don't know the way. I can't. I have to patrol and have no time to act as your guide. Mina's house is over there. There are 2 cherry blossom trees in front of her house. The patrol guard pointed in a direction and walked away. Thank you. Chirio bowed deeply to the patrol guards who had already left. Following in the direction they pointed, she was soon at Mina's house. Mina's parents had died in the Second War, and she was orphaned at a very young age. The clan had assigned a guardian for her earlier, but once she was an academy student, the guardian was removed. At this moment, there was no one in her house except for the white kitten lying on the floor in front of the door. Creak, the courtyard's wooden door was left unlocked. After all, this was the Uchiha territory. As long as someone did not need to leave for long, people would usually just close the door. When Chirio pushed open the courtyard door, the kitten became alert. Swish, it hid behind a pillar, and stuck out half of its small head to observe. But when it saw Chirio, and especially the cat food, it immediately dropped its vigilance and eagerly rushed out. This was also because Mina brought it to the academy every day. Only when training together with Tonen, she would leave the kitten alone at home. The kitten had been in the academy long enough to see some of Mina's classmates. Therefore, it was not afraid. Just after stepping into the small courtyard, Chirio saw the kitten running over to her feet. It kept rubbing its head on her leg, but its eyes were focused on the cat food in Chirio's hands. Chirio was unmoved by the kitten's little shenanigans. She just looked down at it quietly, her eyes filled with indifference. The kitten wanted to eat food. Seeing that its move didn't work, it changed its way to act cute. In its memory, as long as it acted cutely, it would get delicious food. The kitten immediately lied on the ground, rolled over and showed its white belly, and then wriggled around. It seemed to be saying, "Come, rub me, no need to pity me." A small smile slowly appeared on Chirio's face, and she softly said, "What a clever child." Seeing the girl smiling, the kitten believed it would be able to eat cat food with a new flavor, and wriggled more. Suddenly, a shadow obstructed its vision. Bang mew. "Pity, you don't belong to me." Chirio turned around and casually threw a note on the dead kitten. She left the small courtyard with the cat food bag and closed the door in passing. Once outside, she put on her weak and delicate look again and headed for her rendezvous with Tonen. At this moment, Tonen was still training with Mina. Even though he had trained many pigeon ninja beasts, he couldn't monitor the entire Konoha at all times. He missed Chirio's cruel act. Time passed, and the sky was completely dark. 9 o'clock. After completing Mina's training for the night, Tonen walked towards the appointed place to meet Chirio. Meanwhile, a flock of white pigeons took off from the woods and flew into the distance. Chapter 23. Laying a Trap, Beauty in Arms. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A full moon rose like a bright light, hanging high in the night sky. In the forest, Hyuga Chirio was walking with an expressionless face. Tree shadows from both sides of the road were cast on the ground, giving off a cold and eerie vibe. Chirio came to the waterfall, and a nostalgic look flashed past her eyes. When she was young, her mother would often bring her here for picnics. When she got dirty, she would run to the river below the waterfall to bathe herself. If she was lucky, she would even catch a fish or two. She never came here again ever since her parents passed away. Chirio slowly crouched down and touched the slightly wet dirt underneath. The scene of Tonen tutoring her on her homework played in her mind. Explosive tags are often laid out in advance and used as traps. Because of this, the effects the surrounding has on the explosive tag should be understood. Bedodem. First was the humidity. If the humidity was too high, then the explosive tag was likely to get wet, resulting in it failing to go off. But oftentimes, we may be limited by unavoidable geographical factors. That would require special treatment. Ordinary explosive tags can be wrapped in dry leaves, slowing the moistening process. One can also sprinkle a layer of chalk on the surface. If it's humid, but you had ample time to prepare, then you can also get dry soil and wrap the explosive tag in it. But of course, you don't need to do all this if you use expensive damage-proof explosive tags. Chirio opened the cat food bag and took out the dry soil from inside, spreading it on the ground. Then, she took out 3 explosive tags from her pocket and placed them on the dry soil. Finally, she sealed them off with the rest of the dirt while also hiding them with the surrounding dead leaves. Tonen. Kun, please don't blame me for this. After she was done talking to herself, she walked step by step to the creek, taking off her clothes as she walked. Splash. Chirio dipped her naked body into the water. With both hands on the bank, she kept her eyes on the trail, waiting for Tonen's arrival. At this time, Mina returned home as well. As she entered the door, she froze seeing the kitten's corpse on the floor. Yuki, tears welled up in her eyes as she scrambled towards the kitten. Its abdomen had been crushed into a mass of gore and it had a horrified expression on its face. Who did this? Who? This kitten meant a lot to Mina, not only because it was adorable and intelligent, but also it was the first gift Tonen gave her. Immersed in her grief, her eyes suddenly fell on a note on the ground. She reached out with a trembling hand and opened it. It read. Sad. If I can't have it, I'd rather destroy it. I left a note under my desk in the classroom. It has my current location on it. Chirio, I'll kill you. Mina gritted her teeth. She wiped her tears but suddenly noticed a change in her vision. In Mina's eyes, a single Tomo was turning slowly. She finally awakened the much-desired Sharingan, but she couldn't feel the slightest pleasure. Instead, she got up and rushed straight towards the ninja academy with great urgency. The forest path was dappled with the shadows of the branches. Tonen strolled through the path expressionlessly, taking each step exceptionally lightly without making the slightest sound. Just like a beast stalking prey in the night. He suppressed his body's aura, ready to launch a thunderous attack at any moment. Other than the forest of death that was sealed off by a barrier, the forests near Konoha were free of any large beasts. Despite that, Tonen was accustomed to being vigilant. Coo-coo, the call of birds rang out in the dark forest. Chirio and Tonen's agreed meeting time was 9:00 p.m. Naturally, Tonen had to arrive on time so he could give her enough time to prepare. Splash. Once he was near the waterfall, he could hear the sound of Chirio splashing in the water under the loud crashing of the waterfall. When he looked over, he saw a silhouette in the darkness with her hands on the bank and body submerged in water, staring at him with fascination. Tonen. Kun, you're here. Tonen pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses and pretended to be nervous. Sorry, I came at a bad time. After saying that, he immediately turned around. Seeing Tonen at a loss, a smug smile appeared on Chirio's lips. She softly said, "You're just on time, Tonen-kun. Please wait for a moment. Chirio, you should hurry and put on your clothes." "Don't worry, I didn't see anything." After saying that, he heard the sound of moving water, and then of bare feet on dry leaves. "I'm done. You can turn around." When Chirio's voice came from right behind him, only then did he move. But Chirio suddenly embraced him, burying her head deep in his chest. Seeing Chirio still naked in his arms, Tonen froze in place, petrified. "Tonen-kun, I like you, did you know that?" Chirio closed her eyes and wrapped her arms tightly around his waist. Tonen looked at the ground behind Chirio. He saw a trail of water from the shore to here. He said in a nervous tone. I know." Chirio tightened her arms around Tonen a little more and asked, "Are you in love with Mina?" The corners of Tonen's lips curved slightly. Reaching up, he gently caressed Chirio's smooth back with his left hand and said in a warm voice. "What made you think that?" "I've always thought of her as a little sister." Whether it was Tonen's answer or his actions that did the trick, Chirio wasn't as high-strung anymore. "I hate it so much. Why did I have to be a Hyuga? Did you know the Hyuga clan doesn't allow its members to marry outsiders? Especially since I'm from a branch house, I was branded with the caged bird from birth. Sometimes, I feel like I am a bird in a cage. All my life, I'm destined to be controlled by the clan, with no freedom or future, not even the right to pursue love. There must be a way out of this," Tonen said, as his left hand slowly slipped down the wet curve and did not stop until he reached Chirio's thin waist. Then, with his right hand, he patted her back. Chirio could feel Tonen's warm hand roaming around her back and she nuzzled his chest comfortably. "My parents were weak, but the main house still ordered them to participate in the war. They had no right to refuse. Even when my father died on the battlefield, no one notified me. They don't think of me as human at all. From a young age, they instilled in me the idea of being loyal to the clan. But I wouldn't have it. I had no choice but to act soft and meek, to fool them into being sorry for me, into thinking I was useless. Maybe then they might remove my mark and expel me from the clan." Tonen looked down at Chirio with a hint of mockery in his eyes, and said, "How naive." Chirio's eyes were closed so she missed his expression, and continued talking by herself. "It's true. I'm too naive. Sometimes, I even think about killing myself. But I couldn't bear to leave you. Your appearance gave me the courage to live. You're so gentle, so kind." Tonen continued patting Chirio's back and said in a slightly cool tone, "Really? You're not planning to kill yourself anymore? Please, keep holding me for a while longer, just like this." Tears flowed from Chirio's eyes, wetting Tonen's chest. Chapter 24. Killing Chirio, integrating Byakugan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At the Ninja Academy, Uchiha Mina arrived at Hyuga Chirio's seat and opened the note she left behind. There, she found Chirio's current location. "Count your last moments, Chirio, I'm coming to get you." Mina crushed the note in her hands, a look of madness appearing on her face as she sped off towards the location. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. A short amount of time had passed. As if she'd fallen asleep, Chirio lay in Tonen's arms, unwilling to get up. As it was just about time, Tonen's right hand paused on her back. Then he put some distance between him and her, but his left arm remained around her thin waist. He looked into her eyes. "Chirio. I have to say, I admire you," Tonen said, as he moved his lips closer to hers. Both of them could feel their hot breath on each other. "But your ambitions are too limited. You're not strong at all. Strong people don't cling to this so-called love. So, let me give you a gift. After saying that, he slowly lowered his head. Ecstasy flashed past Cheerio's eyes as she slowly closed them. His left arm around Cheerio's waist suddenly tightened, pressing her soft body against his own while he rhythmically formed seals with his right hand. A few moments later, their lips parted, but the two maintained a distance close enough where the tips of their noses were slightly touching. Tonen whispered in a deep and magnetic voice, "Enough. It's almost time. The explosion tags are already wet." The sentence was like a rude alarm, waking Cheerio up with a start. Eyes open, she activated her Byakugan and thrust her delicate right palm on Tonen's chest. Poof crackled. An arcing lightning needle pierced through the back of her head, penetrating through her entire skull and exiting between her brows. In the very next moment, the chakra on Cheerio's right hand faded away as it lay limply on Tonen's chest. All vitality vanished, she fell into Tonen's arms. "You love me, so you want me to die with you. That's not love, but a perversion." Tonen had activated his 3 Tomo Sharingan at some point. As the crimson eyes looked down at the corpse in his arms, he said with a pitying face, "No matter what the reason, if you want me to die, then you leave me no choice but to kill you. With your radical ideas, I wouldn't feel safe if you stayed alive." At this moment, Tonen felt a subtle warm current flow through his entire body. This chakra attribute. Water and earth. Not bad. This is, in Tonen's vision, the meridians in Cheerio's body appeared. When he looked up, it was as if the scenery around him had changed color. It was not the same white color shown by an authentic Byakugan, but a unique red, similar to an infrared detector. A 360-degree vision without any blind spots. The abilities of the Byakugan have integrated with the Sharingan. "Cheerio, I didn't expect you to be such a treasure." Tonen's face was filled with joy as he instinctively controlled the eyes. The Sharingan had now disappeared, and the veins around his eyes bulged, activating the Byakugan. Aided with the system's power, Tonen could switch between the Sharingan and the Byakugan at will. He could also supplement the power of one dojutsu into the other. This was useful. Shuike kunai slashed across Cheerio's neck, beheading her. Since he killed someone, he had to clean up after himself. After all, there existed the Yamanaka clan in Konoha that could probe into memories of the dead. Thud. Cheerio's headless body fell heavily on the ground. Tonen threw the head into the clearing before quickly forming hand seals. Fire style, great fireball technique. A blazing fireball scorched the head in an instant. After finishing up, Tonen unhurriedly fastened his collar's buttons and smoothed out the creases on his shirt. He turned and left down the path. By killing Cheerio, he gained both the water and earth attributes, as well as a superficial form of the gentle fist. But the most valuable thing he gained was the Byakugan. Even more so, he made the unexpected discovery that the Byakugan and the Sharingan were compatible with each other. In that case, in the dark forest, dozens of eyes glowed red, taking in the view of everything happening in the vicinity. As Tonen expected, mirror heaven and earth change could be combined with the Sharingan to control the pigeons and share their vision with him. Now that the Byakugan's power was integrated into the Sharingan, he could use it even with these white pigeons. The only downside was that a substantial amount of chakra was required to maintain this ability. Even so, Tonen was satisfied. In the shinobi world, the most important thing was information. Otherwise, someone as strong as Uchiha Madara wouldn't have been stabbed in the back. Tonen was in a good mood when he saw a familiar figure running through the forest towards his location through the shared vision with one of the white pigeons. He stopped his footsteps and his face turned dark. He said in a cold voice, "No wonder you were trying to stall, you were thinking of bringing both of us along for the ride." After saying that, Tonen slowly walked into the dark jungle. A large cloud drifted over the sky, swallowing up the full moon little by little. On the far side, a huge shadow approached as if it were devouring the entire forest. On the other side, a furious Mina was dashing through the jungle. She soon arrived at the waterfall. Since it was too dark right now, she couldn't see too well. As soon as she walked 2 steps, she seemed to have stepped on something. Looking down, she picked up the object. These are that bitch's clothes. Mina frowned. Her nostrils twitched slightly, sniffing twice before muttering, "Why does it smell like roast meat here?" Mina followed the smell for a few steps before her body froze in place. A cold chill ran down her spine. There, just a short distance away, was the naked and headless corpse of a girl. About 5 or 6 meters away from the body was a charred head whose face could no longer be identified, and the ground around it was scorched black. This is, looking at the clothes in her hands, Mina gulped. She could guess that the dead girl was Cheerio. Even though it wasn't her first time seeing a dead body, this kind of situation made her blood curdle. Cheerio must have been bathing in the river under the waterfall. Who could have killed her before she could even put her clothes back on? She must have been beheaded before her head was charred with a fire release technique. Has that person left? Could it be an enemy ninja? Or a perverted ninja lurking in the village? I heard the clan's elder women say they often discovered perverts peeping into the baths. Many possibilities crossed her mind, and the more she thought, the more fear she felt. She quickly tossed the clothes and ran towards the village. The road along the way was littered with withered leaves, which crunched as Mina stepped on them in her furious run. She had to report this to the police. Even though she hated Cheerio, it was a fact that someone killed her. And, there was a high possibility of the culprit being a spy from the enemy village. As a Konoha resident, she had to report such matters as soon as possible. That bitch was better off dead anyway. Now she can't have any thoughts about Tonen.kun. Thank God I arrived late. Otherwise, I might have been killed together with her. As these thoughts ran through Mina's head, a realization hit her, and she slowed down. Why didn't Cheerio ask her to come straight to the river in the first place, and made her go to school instead? She was stalling for time. She must have made plans to meet with someone else from the beginning. And that person was Tonen.kun. Chapter 25. Mina's suspicion, dropping guard. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 25. Mina's suspicion, dropping guard. Uchiha Mina stopped, opened her palm, looked at the note palm, and her back was drenched with cold sweat. How can this be? There is no reason for Tonen.kun to kill her. Mina shook her head, denying this thought. She continued to rush towards Konoha, but she felt a thorn in her heart. She started to continuously think about what had happened that day. When she noticed an anomaly, she stopped again. Today, after Tonen.kun and I parted ways, we went into a different direction from usual. He was headed this way. Judging from the traces at the scene, that bitch's head must have been burned by the great fireball. Tonen.kun knows this ninjutsu. If someone else had killed her, then her corpse shouldn't be there, rather it would be on the shore. As a girl, after noticing a stranger, she would definitely try to put on her clothes. In other words, she walked over to that place, stark naked. Gudong Mina swallowed uncomfortably, forcing herself to not think any further. Just when she was preparing to walk again, a figure suddenly appeared on the path ahead. Because of the moonlight's direction, Mina was unable to see who the person was. She could just vaguely discern the tall man's back and the bird on his shoulder. Mina felt her blood becoming cold and her legs trembling. She couldn't walk and the fear in her heart spread throughout her body. At that moment, that person slowly turned around. In the darkness, those blood-red eyes with 3 spinning tomo were especially conspicuous. Mina's eyes widened in horror. She instinctively opened her mouth, wanting to scream, but no sound came out. She seemed to have lost her voice in extreme fear. Step, step. The man walked towards Mina, step by step, and every step seemed to trample on her heart. The distance between the two gradually shrunk, and she could see the person's face. It was Uchiha Tonen. Tonen was carrying a basket, and with a refined and easygoing smile, he said, "Mina, I didn't expect to meet you here. Did you also come here to cook outside?" He lifted the basket in his hand as he asked. It was filled with various kinds of wild ingredients. Benov calm, yes, that's right, too. Tonen.kun, Mina smiled stiffly with cold sweat dripping from her forehead. Hearing her, Tonen smiled, patted the white pigeon on his shoulder, and said, "Little guy, go look for food yourself." Coo coo, the white pigeon chirped, spread its wings, and flew into the forest. Immediately afterward, Tonen reached out, gently held her fist that was holding a note, and said warmly, "You are lucky, you'll get to eat delicious food today." Mina's mind had become blank at that moment. She was so confused she did not resist, and she was pulled along by Tonen. After a while, the two arrived at an open space. In the middle, there was a bonfire, and an iron cooking pot was placed above it, using stones as support. Tonen pulled Mina over and made her sit in front of the bonfire. He put the basket's ingredients into the pot to cook. The flickering fire illuminated his face. That face, which looked flawless in Mina's eyes before, seemed frightening now. However, Tonen didn't make any strange movements. He just looked at the bonfire calmly and said, "I used the living expenses left behind by my parents when they went to the battlefield to buy books. With nothing to eat, I often come to the forest by myself to cook." At this moment, Mina had collected herself a little, and she probed, "Tonen.kun, I wanted to ask you something." "What is it? What do you think of Cheerio?" Mina was very tense. She was ready to run if she noticed anything amiss. However, Tonen didn't show any abnormalities. While flipping the food in the pot with chopsticks, he lightly said, "Didn't I tell you before? I think of her as a younger sister. Honestly speaking, she is very cute, but I don't have any thoughts about her." Mina didn't see any anomaly and let out a deep sigh of relief. It smells good." Tonen picked up the only piece of fresh green mushroom from the pot with his chopsticks and placed it in front of Mina's mouth. "Try this." Mina looked at the green mushroom and a lesson from class popped in her head. The more brightly colored the mushroom, the more poisonous it is. She smiled stiffly and said, "No thanks, I'm not hungry." Tonen didn't force her. He stuffed the green mushroom into his mouth, chewed it, and said happily, "So tasty, I like this kind of mushroom the most. Unfortunately, I just found one today." Then, he picked up a piece of brown mushroom and put it inside his mouth. After eating it, he glanced at Mina, picked up another brown mushroom from the pot, placed it in front of his mouth, and blew it. He then moved it in front of her mouth and gently said, "Come on, this mushroom is very delicious." Seeing Tonen had already eaten a similar kind of mushroom just now, Mina laid down her guard a little and opened her mouth to eat it. A fresh fragrance erupted in her mouth. She could swear she had never eaten such a delicious mushroom before. "Is it tasty?" Hearing Tonen's question, Mina nodded and said, "It's tasty." "Then, eat some more." Tonen began to pick up another piece of brown mushroom and kept blowing on it. By now, Mina had already dropped most of her vigilance. "Tonen.kun, I want to ask you one more thing. Did you see Cheerio today?" "No, why are you asking about her again?" I'm just casually asking." After speaking, she opened her mouth and ate the mushroom. Tonen shook his head and reproached, "It's not safe for a girl to run into the forest at night. I heard many girls in the village had accidents at night recently. The guards are investigating everywhere." After he spoke, Mina immediately exclaimed, "What? Is it a pervert?" Tonen didn't seem to be surprised hearing Mina's question. He said while picking up a mushroom, he should be considered a pervert, but he isn't weak. He is not caught yet. Mina nodded, hesitated for a bit, and put out the final test. "In fact, I didn't come out to cook. The weather was so hot, so I was going to the river to bathe. Tonen smiled, reached out his hand, rubbed Mina's hair, and said in a pampering voice, "So, that's why you're here. But it would be best if you return home and bathe with clean water. The river water is not too clean. If you get sick, I'll be very sad." Mina had already relaxed completely now. She felt the person in front of her gave her a special sense of security. "Mina, how can you doubt Tonen-kun? He is so good, how can he kill a person? He also has no reason to kill that bitch. Even if he's lustful, as long as he opens his mouth, wouldn't she do anything for him? He's so smart, how can he be so stupid at this moment?" Thinking of this, a sense of guilt emerged in her heart. She started to consider whether to tell him about Chirio's death. But after thinking for a while, she didn't say it. If he learned about it, he will go to that waterfall to check the situation. And if by chance that pervert returns, he will be in danger. Let's leave this to the guards. After a while, the food in the pot was over. Tonen stood up, patted his butt, and said, "All right, I'll take you home. It's already so late, I won't be at ease if you went back alone." After speaking, he held Mina's hand and walked towards the village. Chapter 26. Hell Viewing Technique, Nightmare. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Uchiha Tonen and Uchiha Mina walked out of the forest, using ground travel to cross Konoha streets and head towards the clan's territory. While walking, Mina suddenly stumbled. Tonen was quick to catch her in his arms and asked with concern, "What's wrong?" Mina's face gradually turned pale. She shook her head and said weakly, "Tonen-kun, my head feels a little dizzy." Looking very worried, he pressed the back of his hand on her forehead. "You're burning up. You must have caught a cold while you were bathing." No, Mina tried to explain, but she found herself unable to speak anymore. Her mind was in a state of confusion. Gradually, she could no longer remember what just happened. Right at this moment, Tonen pulled Mina hard into his arms and moved her head closer. Just like that, the two kissed under the streetlight. In the distance, an umbu leaped from a rooftop and turned his gaze towards them. "Are all little brats this precocious these days?" the umbu muttered to himself and left, unwilling to stay around for this display of affection. After the umbu was gone, Tonen let Mina go. At this moment, her mind was in a complete blur. There was still some distance before they reached the Uchiha clan grounds. Not only did they have to watch out for the umbu, but they also had to avoid the clan's night patrol. This was not too tough though. Tonen lifted Mina by the waist and blinked his eyes. The white pigeon's eyes lying and hiding all glowed red with the Sharingan. Combined with the piercing vision of the Byakugan, the patrollers on the road became visible to him. Fush Tonen dashed towards the grounds like a black shadow. Holding Mina, he constantly changed direction and avoided the patrol left and right. Finally, they arrived undetected at her home. Tonen carried her into the courtyard and glanced at the dead kitten in the yard before striding into the house. He placed Mina on the bed. Through the penetrative view of the Byakugan, he studied the locations of her meridian points. Then, he firmly tapped on her pain point. Her eyes snapped open. Tonen's rapidly turning 3 tomo entered her vision. Genjutsu, Hell Viewing Technique. Late at night, the moon was completely hidden by the overcast clouds. Rumble. A thunderous roar broke out as a lightning bolt cut through the sky. The sound jolted Mina awake and she looked around. This place is, how did I end up in my room? That's right. I was sparring with Tonen-kun, then I came back home. I saw, what did I see? Why can't I remember? Mina hit on her head with her fist as if trying to remember something important. Shwa. The continuous rainfall thrumming overshadowed everything else. For some reason, Mina had a surreal feeling. Suddenly, her eyes widened. Through the windows, a blue light struck every now and then, showing a dark, hazy, humanoid figure slowly walking past the window. Tap, tap. Mina jumped out of the bed and pulled out her kunai, eyes alert. The footstep sound reached the door before coming to a halt. Rumble thunder clapped as an icy lightning flash lit up the courtyard. Mina could vaguely see the figure outside unsheath a blade. She slowly scooted next to the door and crouched down in wait. Second by second, time passed. The person behind the door did not move. By now, the rain was so loud that even if Mina held her breath, she could hardly hear anything. Did he leave? She quietly gulped and slowly moved her body a little, eyes fixed on the door. As lightning struck in the sky again, the figure disappeared from the door. Phew! Mina heaved a sigh of relief. Her body had long been soaked with sweat. Are you looking for me? A cold voice suddenly asked from behind her. Mina looked around with a start. Horrified, she activated her single Tomo Sharingan instinctively. She saw the figure holding a long blade in its right hand and something round in its left. The lightning flickered outside the room again, and the sudden brightness allowed her to see who this person was. Uchiha Tonen. Held by its hair in his left hand was a face she knew well. Fear and despair were imprinted on Hyuga Chirio's face. Scarlet blood dripped from the blade, sliding off the tip before falling pitter-patter on the ground. No. No. Mina wanted to run, but her body would barely budge. She could only be pushed into a corner, as Tonen moved step by step towards her, slowly raising his blade. Why? Why? Mina lifted a trembling hand and tried to make seals, but she couldn't remember a single one. Savor this pain. A cruel smile played on his lips as he stabbed the blade violently into her stomach. Feeling a sharp pain hit her, her pupils contracted. Shwick shwick Tonen stabbed the blade into her over and over again, seemingly taking pleasure in doing so. As her blood gushed out, Mina felt her mind collapsing and her strength gradually leaving her. The single Tomo disappeared as her eyes closed shut. Purr, what's that sound? Be quiet, what's that wet feeling? Mina slowly opened her eyes and woke up in her bed. The soft sunlight from outside warmed her body. A little kitten was licking her face. She sat up and wiped the saliva, taking the kitten in her arms. Petting its head, she said, I think I had a nightmare. Yuki, are you hungry? Meow, oh no, I'm late. Mina yelped and jumped out from her blanket. But she then glanced at the calendar hanging over her bed. October 6th. What the hell? It's an off day. She sighed with relief and took the cat food out of the cupboard, pouring it into the kitten's bowl. She also made breakfast for herself before sitting down under the eaves alone, eating as she looked at the cherry blossom trees in the courtyard. For some reason, she would fall into a trance after every few bites, as if she had dementia. Even Mina did not realize how quiet her surroundings were, as if no one was around. Time gradually passed by. In the blink of an eye, it was evening. Mina woke up with a start and looked up at the sky. Then, packing up her things, she headed for the training arena. On the way there, she heard the sound of clan members talking from the courtyards on both sides. But she could only hear them, not see them. Mina didn't think too much about it. At this hour, most people should be eating dinner at home. By the time she realized it, she had already arrived at the arena. She saw Tonen sitting on the grass, waving at her with a smile. Tonen.kun, Mina mumbled, a happy smile appearing on her face as she walked over to him. Chapter 27. Real Dreamland, Overriding Memory. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The sky had darkened. Uchiha Mina felt out of form today. She would space out during the training session with Uchiha Tonen, often missing out on his pointers. Mina, if you feel unwell, you should go back and rest, Tonen patted her shoulder, pulling her back to reality. I'm sorry, Tonen.kun. Perhaps, it's because I didn't sleep very well last night, Mina apologized. Tonen soothingly stroked Mina's hair and said, let's end for today, then. You go back home. I've something to do today, so I'll see you tomorrow. Mina nodded and listlessly walked towards her house. However, as soon as she stepped home, she saw her kitten had died tragically in the courtyard. And there was a note on the ground that had the location of the waterfall written on it. That emotional outburst triggered Mina's one Tomo Sharingan. She threw the note on the ground and bolted out as if she had gone crazy. In the dead of the night, Mina ran through the forest and soon arrived not far from the waterfall. Suddenly, she stopped and hid in the cover of the dense forest. She saw Hyuga Chirio come out of the water, stark naked, walk up to Tonen, and tightly hug his back. Tonen. I like you. Mina, who was hiding in the darkness, burned with anger. She gritted her teeth and muttered, "This bitch. I'm sorry, Chirio, I know you like me but I've always thought of you as a younger sister. Moreover, I've someone in my heart already." Tonen's firm voice resounded in the night. Who? Who do you like? I've always liked Mina. My heart is completely taken by her and cannot hold anyone else. Seeing Tonen resolutely reject Chirio, Mina's anger instantly dissipated, and she felt sweet in her heart. Why? What's there to like about her? Where don't I measure up? Tonen. Don't leave, you can do whatever you like with me, Chirio roared hysterically. Chirio, please conduct yourself with some dignity, Tonen pried open her hand and left without looking back. Chirio fell to the ground and cried as he walked away. Mina watched her for about 10 minutes before she quietly walked out from the forest and came behind her. This bitch not only killed Yuki-chan but also wanted to seduce Tonen. With her beauty. Kill her. Kill her. The devil's voice rang in Mina's head and she subconsciously raised a kunai. Chirio seemed too deep in her sorrow to notice the movement behind her. Swish, the kunai sliced through Chirio's neck, and her head was cut off. Only then did Mina come to her senses and looked at the blood-bathed kunai in horror. I killed someone. What should I do now? If anyone finds out, I'll be sentenced to death. Mina staggered a few steps and regret filled her heart. She turned around and ran towards Konoha. But just after 2 steps, she stopped, her face distorted with a hint of ferociousness. A voice whispered in her mind. The Yamanaka clan can examine the deceased's memories. Mina turned around. Staring at the severed head with her bright red Sharingan, she began to form hand seals. Fire style, great fireball technique. Mina, who had never released a great fireball before, successfully did so. The huge fireball hit its target, burning Chirio's head in an instant. After doing this, Mina was unwilling to stay for another second and ran towards Konoha. At the intersection before entering the village though, she bumped into Tonen. He was walking towards the village by himself. Surprised to see her here, he asked, Mina, how come you're here? Mina forced herself to calm down and replied with a smile, I couldn't sleep, so I came out for a walk. Taking her word for it, Tonen nodded and said, it's too late. It's not safe for a girl to walk alone. Let me walk you home. He took her hand in his and they walked together towards Konoha. They silently passed through several quiet streets, not saying anything through the way. Suddenly, Tonen opened his mouth and said, Mina, actually, I like you. Will you go out with me? Tonen. Mina was hesitant. Had it been earlier today, she would have accepted it eagerly. But at this moment, her heart was in chaos, and she had no interest in dating. When all was said and done, her hands were stained with a person's life. Tonen. I want to tell you something. Mina stared at Tonen in front of her. Tell me. I killed Chirio right now. It was on the spur of the moment. You've to believe me. Do you think the village will sentence me to death? Mina became increasingly agitated as she spoke, and tears filled her eyes. Tonen was shocked. It took him a long time to collect himself. He then solemnly said, "As your boyfriend, I will definitely protect you. I'm sure this matter would be found out. Tomorrow, I'll go and confess to Hokage-sama, and beg him to be lenient." But, calm down. Tonan's voice was deep. He then took a deep breath and softly said, "Listen to me, Mina, you don't need to worry about this. I love you." He kissed Mina's forehead and then knocked her unconscious. In Mina's room, Tonan's forehead was full of sweat, and he was exhausted. Closing his eyes and opening again, he deactivated his Sharingan. He took the note, that Mina was firmly holding on to, and left the room. Coming to the dead kitten in the courtyard, he placed the note next to it. As for the original note that was on the ground, he took it away. With the scapegoat arranged, everything was set. Taking a final look, like a ghost in the darkness, he leaped away from the courtyard and rushed home. When he saw Mina in the forest, he had already hatched this plan. First, he made Mina eat mushrooms containing neurotoxins that impacted the nervous system, making people lose recent memories. Although Tonan also ate them, he had eaten the green mushroom, which had detoxifying properties, before that. To ensure the neurotoxin had the greatest effect and would smoothly erase her memories, he also destroyed her spiritual power using genjutsu continuously. Immediately afterward, he created an illusion domain, making everything she experienced in the illusion overwrite her real memories. The final step was to replace the evidence. He guessed that for such a minor matter with irrefutable proof, Konoha's higher-ups wouldn't send very professional personnel to investigate. If there was truly some oversight, then flaws would appear. At that time, he could only hope that Sarutobi Hiruzen would override all objections and protect him. He had used too much chakra and spiritual power to construct an illusion domain for Mina earlier. Therefore, he went straight to sleep after he returned home. Tomorrow, he had to put on a good show. Chapter 28. Turning himself in, Umbu interrogation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day, dawn lined the horizon. Uchiha Tonan struggled to get up. The intense genjutsu he used the day before consumed much of his chakra. A few hours of sleep were not enough to replenish it. His body was sluggish. The first thing he did after waking up was open up his diary. Nothing noteworthy happened in recent days. Hence, his diary comprised only fillers. The content of the Will of Fire was written over and over again until Tonan himself wanted to throw up. October 6th. Something big happened today. I thought about it for a long time, but I cannot pen it even now. Last evening, Chirio asked me to meet her at the waterfall in the forest. She said she had something to tell me. Unexpectedly, she appeared in front of me naked. And wanted to become my woman. I ran. I have only thought of her as a little sister. What's more, I've already fallen in love with Mina. I thought this would have been the end of the matter, but I never thought I'd bump into Mina on my way back to the village at night. Her expression didn't look right, but I didn't notice it at first. I gathered my courage and confessed my feelings to her. I even kissed her. She didn't reject me, which made me so happy that I felt like the happiest person in the world. But then she told me, she killed Chirio with her own hands. I don't know what to do. According to the village's rules, Mina should be executed for what she did. But I can't bear for that to happen. Now, Mina and I are the only ones who know this secret. On one hand, it's my village, and on the other, my lover. Who should I choose? The words written were extremely messy and stopped abruptly at this point. Tonan also left a few ink dots on the blank space left behind. Then, he tossed the pen on top of the open diary and left the house with a lost look on his face. On the road, he dilly-dallied for more than 2 hours before he arrived at the Hokage residence. Inside the Hokage's office, Sarutobi Hiruzen was leaning back in his chair with a leisurely expression, smoking a pipe. Suddenly, he sat up straight. Immediately after, Tonan knocked on the office door. "Enter." Pushing open the door, Tonen came inside. He looked at Hiruzen with a pale face, like he wanted to speak but paused again. Eventually, he just dropped his head and remained silent. Tonen, what happened? Tonen clenched his fists and kneeled on the ground at once. Tears overflowing from his eyes, he sobbed, Hokage-sama, I've killed someone. Please execute me. Hiruzen was startled for a moment. He came to Tonen's side and said in a grim voice, Tonen, raise your head and look at me. Tonen slowly lifted his head, but before he could even meet Hiruzen's eyes for more than a second, he lowered it again. His eyes were constantly moving, looking guilty. Hiruzen frowned, but he felt at a loss on what to do. Right now, the most important thing was to suppress this matter. Hiruzen immediately called the Umbu over. Bring Tonen to the interrogation department. Don't let anyone interrogate him without my orders, Hiruzen commanded with a serious face. Yes, the Umbu answered. He grabbed Tonen and left using the body flicker technique. This was a tricky situation for Hiruzen. Tonen had shown value far beyond any of his peers, and he was also loyal to him. Hiruzen did not want to execute him just like that. But in Konoha, regardless of who was murdered, the murderer must be punished according to the rules. If it's really impossible, then I can just assign him to the route and keep him anonymous Hiran. That would spare his life. Hiruzen had already begun thinking of a way out. No, there's something wrong here. If he's already decided to turn himself in, then why would he look guilty, like he's hiding something? Hiruzen narrowed his eyes slightly. Something unusual caught his attention. Guilt meant that he lied. In that case. Umbu. Hokage-sama, go to Tonen's house and bring me his diary. Yes. 15 minutes later, the Umbu presented Tonen's diary to Hiruzen. Hiruzen quickly flipped through it to the final few days. Sure enough. This kid actually fell in love without telling anyone. The village on one hand, and your girlfriend on the other, so you chose to become a scapegoat. Hiruzen shut the diary and handed it to the Umbu. Take the diary back. And bring Uchiha Mina to the interrogation department. Yes, Hokage-sama. Once the Umbu left, Hiruzen headed for the interrogation department with his hands behind his back. Konoha's torture and interrogation department was built underground and special shinobi kept watch at many checkpoints to ensure no blind spot. Hokage-sama, the leader of the Konoha interrogation department, Yamanaka Takuya, greeted Hiruzen at the door. The two talked as they walked towards the interrogation room. Yakuya, Tonen hasn't been interrogated yet, right? No. Will you interrogate him yourself? No need. I'll just listen from the side. The most recent information we obtained shows that Uchiha Mina is the culprit. At the same time, she's Tonen's girlfriend. On the face of it, Hiruzen was making a simple comment, but there was an unmissable undertone to it. I see. I understand. The interrogation room had an adjoining chamber divided only by a single mirror. Sitting inside, Hiruzen quietly watched the scene unfold in the interrogation room. Takuya entered the room with a cool expression. He saw Tonen sitting on the chair as if his soul had left his body, not even lifting his head. Clearing his throat, Takuya said, Uchiha Tonen. I understand your situation, but I also have a few questions to ask you. Looking as if all hope had abandoned him, Tonen said, Go ahead. I'll confess everything. What do you mean you'll confess everything? The veins on Takuya's forehead were bulging. Had Hiruzen not been watching them right now, he would have punched Tonen. Taking a deep breath, Takuya opened his book, lifted his pen, and wrote quickly as he bombarded Tonen with rapid-fire questions. What's your relationship with the deceased? Classmates. Where's the last place you saw the deceased? Under the waterfall east of the Hokage Rock. What was she doing at the time? She was taking a bath. What's your motive for killing her? Motive. Tonen stiffened. Why'd you decide to kill her? The question came too quickly, and Tonen looked like he hadn't even thought about how to answer it. Eyes darting left and right, he hesitantly replied, because she likes me. Takuya slammed his pen on the book and yelled, do you think that's a good enough reason? But I don't like her. Tonen was so anxious that his forehead was covered in sweat as he incoherently explained, she appeared naked in front of me. She even hugged me. I was angry, do you know the consequences of taking the blame for someone else? Takuya's tone had gone completely cold. Arms over his chest, he had given up making records. Up to this point of the interrogation, he could determine that Tonen was not the murderer, so there was little point in writing a statement. I'm not taking the blame for anyone. I'm not, please, you have to believe me. 2 streaks of tears ran down Tonen's cheeks as he pleaded with Takuya. Takuya sneered, fine. Let me ask you one last question. How'd you kill her? As soon as that question came out, Tonen was at a loss for words again. He lowered his head and took a deep breath. More than 10 seconds passed before he lifted his head and spoke uncertainly, I don't remember. I think I killed her with a kunai, be specific. Where'd you stab her with the kunai? Did you stab her 2 centimeters above the heart? Takuya rapped his fingers loudly on the table as if to draw the boy's attention. Yes. That's where it was. Tonen widened his eyes and answered with uncertainty. But when Takuya heard Tonen's admission, he gathered his book and pen, not sparing him another glance. Enough. Our investigators have already checked the crime scene. The deceased's head was decapitated before it was burned with fire. Uchiha Tonen, obstructing official duties is a punishable offense. You dare to take the blame for someone else in the face of the interrogation department. You're a fool. Saying that, Takuya left the interrogation room without a second look at Tonen and entered next door. Chapter 29. Mina's Confession, Distinguish Right Wrong. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 29. Mina's Confession, Distinguish Right Wrong. Hokage.sama, you heard that too. Alas. Is Uchiha Mina caught yet? We have already locked her in another interrogation room before you arrived. Did you want to see the interrogation? Let's go. The 2 left and went to the next interrogation room where Mina was locked up. At this moment, she was sitting on a chair. Her face filled with fear, she looked extremely worried. Bang! Yamanaka Takuya walked into the room, sat indifferently in front of her, and began his questions. Tell me what you did yesterday in detail. If you confess, I might help you get a lenient punishment. You should know Uchiha Tonen wanted to take the blame for you today, but his lies were too obvious. I saw through it easily. If you don't confess, I can only handle this matter according to the law and execute him. Takuya lied to pressurize Mina. Tonen.kun wanted to die for me. No, I don't want it to be like this. It was me who did it, it has nothing to do with him. It was obvious that Mina's thoughts weren't too complicated. Hearing Takuya's words, she immediately became agitated. Why did you kill Hyuga Chirio? I'm sorry. It was unintentional. I was impulsive. Answer my question, why'd you kill Hyuga Chirio? She killed Yuki.chan first, then she used her naked body to seduce Tonen.kun. At that time, I was so angry. Yuki.chan is the cat Tonen.kun gave me. It was his first gift to me. Takuya wrote down the motive for the crime in his notebook. He nodded in satisfaction and said, all right, beginning from when you woke up yesterday, tell me everything. Don't omit a single thing. You can't hide anything from me. Yesterday, soon, Mina told him everything she remembered. When she was done, Takuya frowned a little and seriously asked, is that it? Her eyes filled with hopelessness, Mina nodded. Tonen.kun, thank you for your kind intentions, but let me bear the consequences of my action. Takuya left the interrogation room with his notebook and came to Sarutobi Hiruzen's side. Hokage-sama, according to Uchiha Mina's confession, she's indeed the one who killed Hyuga Chiryu. This is the record. Please take a look at it. Hiruzen took the record and read it carefully. The motive, process, and description of the crime scene were all in line with what we found out from Tonen's diary. Well, this should be about right. Takuya hesitated for a bit, but he still expressed his doubts. I can't help but feel something is amiss. What do you mean? Hiruzen raised his head in confusion and asked. I don't know. I can't put a finger to it, it's just an intuition. Since a high-ranked professional such as Takuya raised doubts, Hiruzen wouldn't take it lightly. For killing a classmate, she'll be executed according to the village's rules anyway. You can ask someone to examine her memory. Yes, Hokage-sama. Takuya replied and was preparing to instruct someone, when Hiruzen interrupted him. Wait, let me speak with Tonen-kun and ask for his opinion as well. Yes. This time, Takuya could also see how high Tonen's position was in Hiruzen's heart. Ask for an opinion. Why ask? Could it be that if Tonen doesn't want us to examine her memories, Hokage-sama wouldn't allow us to do so? Or, as long as Tonen insisted, Hokage-sama would protect a death row prisoner. A young Uchiha kid was such a heavyweight. In the interrogation room, Tonen had his hands stuck in his hair. He looked thoroughly depressed and dejected. Tonen. Hiruzen quietly entered the room, walked to him, and gently patted his shoulder. Tonen raised his head. Seeing the kind and warm-looking Hiruzen in front of him as if he had seen a close relative, tears glistened in his eyes. He hugged Hiruzen and cried, Hokage. Sama, the corners of Hiruzen's mouth rose slightly. He sighed and said, Child, I can understand your thoughts, but there are things we can't change. I'm very sad. Mina has already confessed to her crime, and according to the village's rules, she must be executed. This is the only way in which can give justice to the villagers and the Hyuga clan. Tonen was startled listening to Hiruzen's words. He looked at him in disbelief and said, Does she have to die? This is terrific. Hiruzen didn't answer immediately. He seemed to hesitate for a while and tentatively said, The deceased, after all, was a Hyuga. It's not the Uchiha clan's internal affairs. No one can show favoritism. Tonen, I hope you can understand. Hiruzen already had a plan in his mind. If Tonen insisted on protecting Mina, he would use other means to quietly save her. This way, Tonen would be deeply indebted to him and do things for him wholeheartedly. It's just that it may put him in a compromising situation, and it would affect his authority to a certain extent. But at this moment, Tonen stopped crying. He stood up slowly, wiped his tears, and said to Hiruzen, I understand. Rules are the foundation of the village. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama, I was ignorant before. Please forgive my selfishness. After speaking, he put his hand on his knees and bowed deeply to Hiruzen. It seems that the village and my status are higher than that little girl's in his heart. Hiruzen was overjoyed. It would be best if he could completely resolve this matter without using special means. Moreover, after Mina's death, Tonen will completely lose his familial and romantic love. At that time, I will be his sole spiritual pillar. This is perfect. It's all right. You are, after all, still young and not mature enough. I hope you will not begrudge the village because of this. Tonen took a deep breath, shook his head firmly, and said, I won't, this is Mina's doing. I won't blame other people. I'm not someone who cannot differentiate right from wrong. Hiruzen nodded and casually added, because it is related to a human life, and Mina is about to be sentenced to death, the interrogation division needs to examine her memories. Tonen's heart sank a little, secretly thinking, the situation was far from good. On the surface, he said with a heartache, will it affect her body? Hiruzen hesitated for a bit and answered honestly, if we examine her memories for too long, Mina may become of unsound mind. Fortunately, the incident didn't happen too long ago, so we just need to examine yesterday's memories, and there shouldn't be any problems. It's just that the process might be a little painful. Tonen closed his eyes and said in a hoarse voice, she must be very scared right now. As her boyfriend, I want to accompany her. If by chance she revealed something that gives the game away, then I can amend it in time. Hiruzen wouldn't refuse such a simple request. He immediately nodded and said, all right. Chapter 30. Probing Memories, Life-Saving Outburst. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sarutobi Hiruzen led Uchiha Tonen out of the interrogation room. They came back to Yamanaka Takuya, and Hiruzen said, let Tonen watch from the side while you look into her memories. I have other commitments at the moment, so I'll leave now. Understood. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen patted Tonen's shoulder and sighed as he left. After seeing Hiruzen off, Takuya glanced at Tonen and said, let's go. Tonen nodded and followed him deeper into the torture and interrogation department. They arrived outside the interrogation room, and two guarding shinobi bowed. Takuya-sama, Takuya nodded and said, take this guy in to observe. Notify me if anything happens. Yes. Tonen walked in and saw a whole range of medical equipment and several unknown drugs all over the interrogation room. In the middle was an iron bed with an electric light bulb hanging above. A blindfolded Uchiha Mina was lying atop. Metal rings restrained her hands, feet, and neck. Her breathing was calm and even like she was deep asleep. Two Yamanaka shinobi, who were in charge of the memory investigation, were in the midst of preparations. One of them, called Yamanaka Hayakawa, was sorting through papers, while the other, Yamanaka Ryoki, was drawing a blue liquid into a syringe. Sit there and don't speak. Don't move around either, Hayakawa said, pointing to a chair at the side without looking up. Tonen silently sat down. Is the sedative ready? She's young, so don't overdo it, Hayakawa reminded Ryoki after sorting the papers. Ryoki nodded silently. He arrived at Mina's side, and inserted the syringe into her veins, pushing the drug in. I'm going to start, Ryoki said, and closed his eyes and pressed both hands between Mina's brow, beginning the memory probe. Mina's body suddenly jolted as if she was struck by electricity and began to shudder. Whimpering sounds came from her mouth as if she was undergoing unbearable torture. Indifferent towards all this, Ryoki began to describe what he saw. I see it. The date is October 6th. Hayakawa, who sat beside Tonen, quickly began writing in a notebook. She got up, fed the cat, and made breakfast. Then, she was daydreaming in the yard. Tonen watched with a pained look, but his heart jumped. Sure enough, long-duration genjutsu came with its flaws. How long was she daydreaming for? Past noon now. During the afternoon, she packed up her things and left. Tonen kept up his anguished expression, but he was constantly planning in his head. Judging by the chakra fluctuation of the probing ninja, he must be a chunin. The other was about the same level as well. If I cast genjutsu on both of them? No. It's too risky. I'll just keep watching for now. She arrived at the arena and met with a person called Uchiha Tonen. She was sparring with me last evening, Tonen suddenly interjected. Hayakawa's face cooled and he warned, be quiet. Sorry. Tonen lowered his head, but a cold glint flashed past his eyes. She was distracted, her mind was constantly wandering off during the training, and she went home just after an hour. She saw her kitten was dead. Next to its body was a note. It said, Hayakawa nodded as he recorded the information. The memory they saw matched up with the evidence so far. It was a solid case. She arrived at the waterfall and hid in the grass. There, she saw Tonen with another girl. That girl, Hyuga Chirio, was professing her love to Tonen. Tonen turned her down and left. Then, she came out and cut off the girl's head, burning it using a great fireball. On the iron bed, Mina's body began convulsing as if she were having a seizure, foaming at her mouth. Enough. She can't take it, don't torture her anymore. Tonen shouted, which interrupted Ryoki's jutsu. Next to him, Hayakawa turned to the tear. Streaked Tonen and coldly said, Tonen, is it? Do you know the consequences of obstructing an interrogation? If you repeat this, I'll have to ask you to leave. I must perform my duties as an interrogator. After rebuking him, he turned to Ryoki and said, continue. Look at her memories from the previous day as well. No, kill me, kill me. Mina wailed. Due to the interruption, she regained her ability to speak. Ryoki paid no attention to her pleas. Such scenes were too commonplace here. As long as he continued the jutsu, all the distracting noise would cease. He immediately placed both hands back in between her brows. When he heard Hayakawa's instruction to search the memories from the day before, Tonen's mind turned, and the tomo in his eyes began to spin. He took out his kunai and turned into a dark shadow, leaping towards Mina. You little brat, I've put up with you long enough. The two Yamanaka shinobi reacted quickly. They had been wary of Tonen's mood swings for a while now. Both approached him at once and attacked to subdue him. Bash bash. Ryoki punched Tonen's stomach and Hayakawa kicked his back. Tonen coughed up blood and collapsed to the ground. Mina, his eyes slackened as he raised a hand towards her with difficulty. This person might be important. We won't get into any trouble, will we? Ryoki frowned. He's obstructing official work. We're in the right if word gets to Hokage-sama. Hayakawa grabbed Tonen by the hair and dragged him outside. The interrogation room's door was opened and the two shinobi watching outside looked at Hayakawa with shock. Hayakawa, what are you doing? Put Ryoki down immediately. Hayakawa was stunned at those words, and asked in confusion, what are you talking about? Then, he looked down. This is Ryoki. Where has that little brat gone? The one that Hayakawa was dragging out was not Tonen, but his fellow interrogator. What was even scarier was that Ryoki still had a thoughtful expression on his face like he was wondering about Tonen's background. Hayakawa quickly put Ryoki down and the three looked at each other before turning back in unison. Oh no! In the torture room, the lamp above continued to illuminate the iron bed at the center. Tonen emerged from the shadows, his face pale and three tomo spinning in his eyes. One hand gently stroked Mina's hair, as he aimed a kunai at her heart with the other. Tonen, Mina murmured. The genjutsu was beginning to lose its effect on her mind and she recovered some of her memories. Fragmented images began coming back to her, and it all eventually settled on the scene where Tonen used his genjutsu on her. At this moment, Mina understood everything. At once, she struggled with all her might. But the metal rings didn't budge. She couldn't move. Seeing her resistance, a sad look appeared on Tonen's face and he said in a hoarse voice, "It's fine now, Mina. The pain will end soon." His words were to soothe but the voice Mina heard was just like the whispers of a devil from hell. She pleaded in a voice full of fear, "Help me.